Have you ever noticed how successful people seem to do the same boring things over and over again? They eat the same breakfast. They work out at the same time. They follow the same morning routine every single day. Meanwhile, you're probably thinking variety is the spice of life. You keep things fresh, you stay spontaneous, you don't want to be one of those robotic people who does the same thing every day. But here's what nobody tells you about this. The people building real wealth aren't doing repetition because they lack imagination. They're doing it because they understand something most people completely miss about how the human brain actually works. Here at Simple Money, I've spent years watching people try to build wealth, and I've noticed something fascinating. The ones who succeed look incredibly boring from the outside. The ones who fail are usually way more interesting at parties. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why millionaires embrace repetition while most people run from it, and why this one difference might be costing you thousands of dollars every single year without you even realizing it. Here's what's really happening. Your brain is burning through massive amounts of energy every single day. Scientists estimate that your brain uses about 20% of your body's total energy. That's insane when you think about it. Your brain is only about 2% of your body weight, but it's consuming a fifth of all your calories. So your brain has developed a shortcut. It tries to automate as much as possible. It wants to turn everything into a habit so it doesn't have to think so hard. Now here's where it gets weird. When you're constantly making decisions, constantly choosing what to do next, constantly being spontaneous, your brain is working overtime. It's exhausting itself on decisions that don't actually matter. And here's the cruel part. Decision fatigue is real. Every choice you make depletes your mental energy. By the time you get to the decisions that actually matter, the ones that could make you wealthy, you're running on empty. Think about it this way. Imagine your willpower is like a phone battery. Every decision you make drains a little bit of that battery. Should I work out this morning or sleep in? What should I eat for breakfast? Which route should I take to work? What should I wear? Where should I eat lunch? By noon, you're at 40% battery. By the time you get home and need to decide whether to work on that side business or watch Netflix, you're at 15%. And we both know what wins when you're at 15%. Millionaires figured this out. They're not more disciplined than you. They just stop draining their battery on decisions that don't build wealth. Let me tell you about what I call the spontaneity tax. This is the hidden cost that nobody talks about. Every time you make a new decision, you're paying a tax. Not in money, in mental energy. You wake up and think, what sounds good for breakfast today? That's a tax. You get to the gym and wonder what workout you should do? That's a tax. You finish work and debate what to make for dinner. Another tax. These feel like small things. They feel like freedom, like living life to the fullest. But they're actually bleeding you dry. Here's what makes this even more insidious. The spontaneity tax doesn't feel expensive in the moment. Each individual decision feels almost free, insignificant. But taxes compound. And by the end of the day, you've paid thousands in mental currency that you could have invested in actual wealth-building activities. Meanwhile, the millionaire woke up and ate the same thing they always eat. They did the same workout they always do. They wore clothes from their simplified wardrobe. They made dinner from their weekly meal prep. They sound boring, right? But here's what actually happened. They saved all that mental energy. And when it came time to make the decision that actually matters, like negotiating a raise or working on their business, they had a full battery. The second reason is what I call the optimization trap. And this one is particularly cruel because it makes you feel productive while actually sabotaging your success. Here's how it works. You're always looking for the better way, the smarter strategy, the optimized approach. You read about a new productivity system and think, maybe this is the one. You hear about a different investment strategy and wonder if you should switch. You're constantly researching, constantly comparing, constantly optimizing. And you think this makes you sophisticated, like you're really taking this seriously? But here's the truth nobody wants to admit. All that optimization is just procrastination wearing a smart outfit. Because here's what happens. You never actually stick with anything long enough for it to work. You're 3 weeks into a budget system when you read about a different app. You're 2 months into index fund investing when you hear about real estate. You're starting to build momentum with one approach when you get distracted by something that sounds better. Think about it like planting a garden. You plant seeds, but then 3 days later you dig them up to check if they're growing. Then you read about a better fertilizer, so you replant everything. Then you hear raised beds are superior, so you start over again. The garden never grows. Not because the seeds were bad, but because you never let anything stay in the ground long enough to actually grow. Millionaires pick something that's good enough and they stick with it. They understand that a decent strategy executed consistently for 10 years beats a perfect strategy that you restart every 6 months. They're not smarter than you, they're just way more boring, and boring is what compounds. Now this next one is what I call the novelty illusion. And this might be the most dangerous one because it's wrapped in something that feels really good. Humans are wired to crave novelty. New things give us a hit of dopamine. A new restaurant. A new workout class. A new productivity app. A new investment strategy. It all feels exciting, fresh, energizing. But here's where things get interesting. That excitement you feel from novelty? It's actually your brain's reward system firing, and your brain cannot tell the difference between productive novelty and destructive novelty. Your brain gives you the same dopamine hit whether you're starting a new business or just rearranging your furniture. Whether you're learning a new valuable skill or just switching to a new budgeting app that does the same thing as your old one. So you end up chasing that feeling. You mistake the excitement of starting something new for actual progress. You think variety equals growth. But what's really happening is you're just running in place while feeling like you're sprinting forward. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Building wealth is actually kind of boring. Saving 15% of your income every month is boring. Investing in the same index funds every paycheck is boring. Saying no to expensive brunches is boring. Working on your side business every evening instead of watching shows is boring. There's no novelty hit, no dopamine rush. Just the same actions repeated over and over and over again. And your brain hates this. It's screaming at you to do something new, something exciting, something that feels like progress even if it's not. Millionaires learn to ignore that voice. Or more accurately, they learn to get their novelty fix somewhere else. They keep their wealth-building system boring and repetitive, and they scratch the novelty itch with things that don't cost them their financial future. The fourth reason is what I call the identity drift. This one is subtle, but it's absolutely devastating to most people's finances. Here's what I mean. Every time you do something different, every time you change your approach, every time you restart with a new system, you're telling yourself a story about who you are. And usually that story isn't helpful. You're telling yourself you're the kind of person who needs variety, who gets bored easily, who's always looking for something better, who hasn't quite found their thing yet. These feel like personality traits, like just who you are, but they're actually choices that are keeping you broke. Because here's what happens with repetition. When you do the same wealth-building actions over and over again, something shifts. You start to become the person who does those things. Your identity actually changes. You're not someone who's trying to save money. You're a saver. You're not someone who's attempting to invest. You're an investor. You're not someone who's working on building wealth. You're someone who builds wealth. This isn't just feel-good psychology. This is how human behavior actually works. Your brain uses your past behavior to predict your future behavior. When you repeat something enough times, your brain says, "Oh, this is just what we do now. This is who we are." But when you're constantly switching things up, constantly starting over, constantly trying new approaches, your brain never gets that signal. You never become anything. You're always just someone who's trying to become something. Millionaires understand this. They picked an identity and they reinforced it with repetition until it became true. Not because they said affirmations in the mirror, but because they did the same boring thing so many times that their brain had no choice but to accept that this is who they are now. The fifth reason is what I call the comparison quicksand. And this one is especially brutal in the age of social media. Here's how it works. You see someone else doing something different. They're into real estate and posting about their rental income, or they're day trading and showing their wins, or they're doing some new side hustle that's blowing up. And you think, maybe I should be doing that instead. Maybe I'm missing out. Maybe my boring, repetitive approach isn't the best way after all. So you start researching their method. You consider pivoting. Maybe you do pivot. And now you're starting from zero in a new area while they're 5 years deep into their thing. But here's what you don't see. They're probably looking at someone else and feeling the same way. Everyone looks at everyone else and thinks the grass is greener. Meanwhile, nobody's actually tending their own garden long enough for anything to grow. Think about it like this. Imagine you're digging for water. You dig down 10 feet, no water yet. Then you see your neighbor digging in a different spot, so you abandon your hole and start a new one. You dig down 10 feet, still no water. Then you hear about someone who found water somewhere else, so you start another hole. You spend your whole life digging 10-foot holes. Meanwhile, the person who just kept digging in one spot eventually hits water at 20 feet. Millionaires put on blinders. Not because they're not curious, but because they understand that depth beats breadth when it comes to building wealth. They'd rather be great at one boring thing than mediocre at 5 exciting things. They're not watching what everyone else is doing. They're just showing up to their thing. Every single day. With the same boring, repetitive actions that everyone else thinks are too simple to work. But here's what nobody wants to admit. Simple, repeated, consistently, beats complex attempted sporadically. Every single time. Let me tell you about 2 people. Both started with the same goal of building wealth. Both had similar incomes. Both were smart and motivated. But 5 years later, one of them had built real wealth, and the other was still struggling. Meet Sarah. Sarah is someone you'd love to be friends with. She's curious. She's interesting. She reads everything about personal finance. She's always learning about new strategies. She started with a budget app, used it religiously for about 6 weeks. Then she read about the envelope system and thought that sounded better, so she switched to that. Tried it for a month, then discovered zero-based budgeting. That became her new thing. For investing, she started with index funds. But then she heard about dividend investing, and that sounded more exciting. So she sold her index funds and bought dividend stocks. Then she read about growth stocks during a bull market. So she pivoted again. She tried 3 different side hustles. Started a blog. Gave up after 3 months. Tried selling on Etsy. Quit after 2 months. Started a YouTube channel. Posted 5 videos, then stopped. Sarah is exhausted. She feels like she's been working so hard on her finances for 5 years. She's read hundreds of articles. She's tried dozens of strategies. She's put in the effort, but her net worth barely moved. Because she never stuck with anything long enough for compound interest to do its thing. Never built any real skills because she kept switching. Never automated any habits because she kept changing systems. Now let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus is the guy you'd probably find boring at a party. He doesn't have exciting stories about his financial experiments. He doesn't have hot takes on the latest investing trend. 5 years ago, Marcus set up a simple system. He automated 15% of his income into index funds. He created a basic budget with 4 categories. He started a side business doing freelance work in his existing skill set. And then here's what Marcus did. Nothing. Well, not nothing. He did the same things, every single month. Same investments, same budget categories, same freelance work. When he heard about dividend investing, he thought about it for a day and decided his index funds were fine. When crypto was exploding, his friends tried to get him to jump in. He passed. When a new budgeting app promised to revolutionize everything, he stuck with his simple spreadsheet. Boring, right? But here's what happened. His automated investments grew through compound interest. His freelance business grew because he got really good at one thing instead of mediocre at 5 things. His budget worked because his brain automated it after doing it the same way hundreds of times. 5 years later, Marcus has a net worth that would shock you. Not because he made some genius move, but because he made boring moves repeatedly. Here's what most people don't realize. The difference between Sarah and Marcus wasn't intelligence. It wasn't opportunity. It wasn't luck. It wasn't even the specific strategies they chose. It was repetition. Marcus was willing to be boring. Sarah needed things to feel fresh. And here's the thing that might blow your mind. Sarah probably put in more total effort than Marcus. She read more articles. She tried more strategies. She made more decisions. She felt like she was really engaging with her finances. But effort without repetition is just exhausting. It's like lifting weights once and then switching to a completely different exercise before your muscles can adapt. You're working hard, but you're not building anything. Marcus understood something that Sarah didn't. Building wealth isn't about finding the perfect strategy. It's about finding a good enough strategy and repeating it until the math works in your favor. Because here's the secret about compound interest. It doesn't care about your strategy. It cares about time. You need to leave your money alone long enough for it to multiply. You need to leave your habits alone long enough for them to become automatic. You need to leave your skills alone long enough for them to become valuable. You can't compound what you keep changing. The people who build real wealth aren't the smartest people. They're not the ones with the best strategies. They're not even the ones working the hardest. They're the ones who picked something reasonable and then became absolutely stubborn about sticking with it. They're boring, predictable, repetitive, and wealthy. Meanwhile, everyone else is still looking for the next thing. The better way. The optimized approach. They're mistaking the excitement of starting something new for the satisfaction of finishing something hard. Here's what I want you to understand. Your brain is lying to you about repetition. It's telling you that doing the same thing over and over is limiting, that you're missing out, that there's got to be a better way. But wealthy people have learned to see through this lie. They know that repetition isn't limiting. It's liberating. When you stop making the same decisions over and over, you free up mental energy for the decisions that actually matter. When you stop optimizing your systems, you can finally let them run long enough to produce results. When you stop chasing novelty, you can experience the quieter but more sustainable satisfaction of compound growth. When you stop drifting between identities, you can actually become someone. The spontaneity tax, the optimization trap, the novelty illusion, the identity drift, the comparison quicksand. These aren't character flaws. They're predictable patterns that your brain defaults to unless you actively choose repetition instead. The question isn't whether you're capable of building wealth. You absolutely are. The question is whether you're willing to be boring enough to let it happen. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to hear. Wealth building is repetitive. It's the same decisions made thousands of times. It's the same actions taken year after year. It's choosing the boring, reliable path when your brain is screaming for something new. Millionaires love repetition because they understand that boring, repeated consistently is what actually works. The excitement fades. The novelty wears off. The optimization obsession exhausts you. But repetition? Repetition just quietly builds wealth while everyone else is still trying to figure out what strategy to try next. So maybe the question you should be asking yourself isn't what's the best strategy for building wealth. Maybe the question is, what's the boring, repetitive thing I'm actually willing to do for the next 10 years? Because once you answer that question and commit to it, you'll understand exactly why millionaires love repetition, and why you should too.